As I'm recording this video, we just got news that LeBron James is most likely not going to return to 100% until this offseason. And if he's going to play in the NBA playoffs this year, he's going to have to play through an injury and most likely not even close to 100% because of this high ankle sprain that he suffered. And he's 36 years old, as we know, and healthy LeBron is still probably the best player in the NBA, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that version of LeBron this season. And this is really going to affect the Lakers' chances, and they're probably not the favorites anymore to come out of the Western Conference and represent the Western Conference in the finals. So today I'm going to be talking about the Western Conference player picture that we're looking at right now, and what the chances are looking like for the contending teams, and how LeBron's injury is going to affect this. So before we get started, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new videos. I post lots of NBA content on this channel, so subscribe so we can also continue that road to 1,000 subscribers on the channel. With that being said, let's get started with the video. So first I'm going to be talking about the Lakers, the pros and cons of their situation right now, and how they're actually not out of the picture at all. A team led by AD on both ends of the floor is still going to be a championship contender. You look at how Anthony Davis played last season in the NBA playoffs, and if he plays like that again with his dominant scoring package in all three levels of the game, especially in the post with his little turnaround jumper and his scoring at the rim, the Lakers are going to be dominant on the offensive end of the floor. And also keep in mind that despite LeBron's injury, he's still going to have that same passing ability, court vision, and playmaking, which is really the main factor to the Lakers' success. And defensively, they're still going to be pretty much the same. LeBron won't be the same on the defensive end of the floor because he won't really have that athleticism and agility. And the big con here is how he won't be able to score 25 to 30 points a game like he usually does, because he's not going to have that same dominant scoring game at the rim. He's still going to push through it. We know that LeBron has tons of heart, determination, and grit, and will do his best to get the job done, but he's obviously not going to be the same, and because of this, the Lakers aren't the favorites. But they're still going to have a really good chance of making the finals with a team led by AD offensively, and still have LeBron's dominant playmaking, and also still have a dominant defense. And if LeBron does get back to 80 to 90%, they still could be the favorites to come out of the Western Conference. So now I'm going to talk about the Los Angeles Clippers, and if LeBron doesn't return to a point where he can impact the game at a really high level and make the Lakers the favorites, the Clippers might be the favorites to come out of the Western Conference. We have to remember that despite their choke artistry last year, they are still probably one of, if not the most stacked teams in the entire league on paper. I look at Kawhi Leonard as a guy who is really having an MVP type of season, and it's going pretty unnoticed because he's overshadowed by lots of other players. And as you guys know, if you watch the channel, I've made a video on why I think Kawhi's really underappreciated. But if he gets going in the playoffs this year, he could really do what he did with the Raptors in 2019 and try to carry his team all the way to the finals. And he still has a really good supporting cast around him, and this team fully healthy is going to be dominant on both ends of the floor. They're really finally figuring out their team defense and how they can succeed at a high level as a team. They have lots of great individual defenders, but it didn't work out for them last year on the defensive end of the floor, but it's getting better, and they have a really good chance this year. And I also look at guys like Serge Ibaka as great additions for this team and great role players, especially in the playoffs. And this might finally be the year where Pandemic P stops choking in the playoffs. I'm not saying it's going to happen for sure, but if this does happen, I'm going to gain a ton of respect back from him, and he's really had a fully healthy season up to this point and is having a dominant year when it comes to scoring the ball, especially at an efficient level, almost shooting 50, 40, 90 this season. And if he doesn't choke in the playoffs, the Clippers are without a doubt favorites. If Paul George plays the same way that he's playing right now in the regular season, you gotta think the Clippers are going to be the favorites. Now, it's also worth noting that with the Lakers falling off right now in the seeding in the Western Conference, there is a very, very good chance that we could see a Lakers and Clippers matchup in the first round. Last year, because they were the two best teams in the league pretty much, we were gonna have to wait until the Western Conference Final to see a potential matchup between those two. But because of how this year has been really interesting, how the Clippers have fell to 3 because of things like Kawhi missing a few games due to load management, and the Lakers just having a horrific season when it comes to injuries and potentially falling all the way down to the 6 or 7 seed, they could definitely face off in the first round, whether that's them being the 2 and 7 seeds, the 3 and 6 seeds, or even the 4 and 5 seeds. And this would be amazing, not only to see them face off in a 7-game playoff series, but also to see either the Lakers or the Clippers go out in the first round. So that's definitely something to note. Due to this LeBron injury and how the Lakers have fell off, we could legitimately see a battle of LA in the first round. The next team I'm going to be talking about is the Phoenix Suns. The Suns also have a legitimate chance to be the favorites coming out of the West. And despite being the number 1 seed right now, I don't know if they've got enough consideration as they've expected for being a number 1 seed because they're still the Lakers and the Clippers. But the Suns are a really good overall team. And I actually made an entire separate video a few weeks ago about why I think they're legitimate contenders. And if you haven't already watched that video, be sure to check it out as well because I go into a lot more detail on what I think about the Phoenix Suns. But when we think about them on the offensive end of the floor, they have their main star player and 26 point per game scorer in Devin Booker, a great traditional big man down low that can clean up the glass and shoot very efficient from the field in DeAndre Ayton, and then obviously their main leader and playmaker in Chris Paul. And then defensively, they have their main perimeter defender in Chris Paul, their interior defender and elite rim protector in DeAndre Ayton, and then their defensive player of the year candidate in Mikal Bridges, who can guard the other team's best player every night. And overall, they have great depth as well and really work well together as a team and as a full unit. And because of this, I see them as legitimate contenders and definitely a top 3 team when it comes to the playoffs in the Western Conference. They legitimately have a very, very good chance of making the finals and ultimately winning the championship if LeBron is truly playing injured. And to be honest, I would love to see the Suns win a championship. CP3 would get his long-awaited first ring. Devin Booker is one of my top 10 favorite players in the NBA, and overall they're such a well-built team that definitely deserves to win a ring. So I have 2 more teams that I want to talk about whose chances of making the finals have increased because of this LeBron injury, but I still see these teams as sleeper teams to make the NBA Finals. And the first of the 2 teams that I'm going to be discussing here, the first one is the Utah Jazz. The Jazz have been a really good overall team this season and have pretty much been holding on to that first seed for the entire season up until the Suns have overtaken them recently due to the Donovan Mitchell injury. Now they have been pretty healthy this whole season and that has played a huge part in why they've done so well, and once the other teams get fully healthy for the playoffs, I don't know if the Jazz are going to be able to compete with them. Teams like fully healthy, the Clippers are going to be very scary, especially if Kawhi and Paul George perform like they should in the playoffs, and the Phoenix Suns I think are a little bit better overall, especially defensively, than the Jazz are. And we look at the Jazz as a team who really overperformed this season, and it's because of how they have an overall great group, especially on the offensive end of the floor. They have great chemistry over there. They do a great job of doing things like moving the ball and communicating with each other, and then on defense they do the same thing. They're very good at communicating. They have their centerpiece in Rudy Gobert. Again though, I don't think they can succeed at a very high level in the playoffs just because they don't have that main star player or that main leader. Like for example, the Suns have Chris Paul as their main leader who's very experienced. The Jazz don't have that yet, and I can see them maybe losing in the second round in like a 7-game series that's really hard fought against a team like the Suns or the Clippers or even the Lakers, even though LeBron won't be fully healthy. And their chances have increased because of this LeBron injury, and they could be a top 3 team in the Western Conference when they are fully healthy, and Donovan Mitchell will be back for the playoffs. But I still don't see them as a favorite to come out of the West. They're a team with great depth and that works well as a team on both ends of the floor, as I talked about, but they're still lacking a little bit of experience, so I don't see them making the finals this season, but they do have a bright future and a great overall team. The last team I'm going to be discussing that I think has a chance of making the finals is the Denver Nuggets. Now we know that the Nuggets are going to be missing Jamal Murray, and we know that last year he was one of their main playoff performers that really excelled in the playoffs and took over a lot of games with his scoring ability late in playoff games and really came up clutch for them, and they wouldn't even have made it out of the first round if it wasn't for him. And because they're missing such a big piece in Jamal Murray, I don't see them as favorites to come out of the Western Conference or, for example, a top 3 team to come out of the West. But they do have the MVP of the league this season, at least in my opinion, in Nikola Jokic. And if you have Jokic on your team that's playing at this level, you have a chance to do anything because he impacts the game at so many levels. He has such a unique scoring ability and can pretty much score from anywhere on the court, in the half court. and he can shoot the three really well and has really improved on that this season. And he's basically the best playmaker in the league. From what I've seen, I think Jokic is the best passer and playmaker in the NBA, and he has such an amazing impact out there on the offensive end of the floor. But the only difference between the Denver Nuggets and some other teams here is, first of all, their depth, and how their depth is really lacking this season, and the supporting cast around Jokic on the offensive end of the floor might not be good enough to get the job done, and maybe not even good enough to get them out of the first round. And also their defense is not as good as a usual championship contending team is. They don't really have any great defenders on the team, and they don't really have a good defensive system either. So they need to improve on that under the floor if they want a legitimate chance, and because they don't really have a great defense, especially right now, I don't see them as a favorite, but they definitely have a chance to make the finals because they have Jokic. So those are the 5 teams that I think have a shot to make the finals out of the West. Basically, the Clippers, Suns, Nuggets, and Jazz's chances have all improved because of this injury to LeBron James that is going to keep him not 100% healthy for the entire playoff run, according to the sources that we've had so far. So I'm going to give you guys my new power rankings for the Western Conference now that we've heard this news. And I've had the Lakers won the entire season, but I'm actually going to be putting the Clippers at number 1. If there's stars like Kawhi and Paul George perform in the playoffs, I think they're the best team in the Western Conference. And then we look at the Phoenix Suns at number 2, who have a great overall team, as I talked about. The Lakers still at 3, since LeBron can still have that playmaking ability. He just won't have the same explosiveness, and AD can be the number 1 option. They still have a great defense. Basically everything I talked about kind of proves that they're still one of the best teams in the Western Conference, with LeBron healthy or not. But I still see them as a top 3 team that still has a really good chance. I'm going to put the Denver Nuggets at 4. As I mentioned, they have Jokic, who has an incredible impact, but their defense isn't there for me to put them as one of the top 3 teams. And then the Jazz at number 5, who just need a little bit more experience before they can get into that top tier of playoff contenders and be one of the favorites to make the NBA Finals. So those are my power rankings and the 5 teams that I think have a chance to make the finals out of the West, and really how it's affected by this news we've heard about LeBron James. So there you have it. That is the end of today's video. Comment down below what you think of the Western Conference and how it's affected by LeBron's injury, where you think the Lakers rank among teams now in the Western Conference after hearing about this news. If you're new, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Western Conference plays out because of this, and really how LeBron finishes the year and how he does in the playoffs if he's not at 100%. So thank you all for watching this video. Comment down below your thoughts, and I'll see you all next video.